Okay, I see it's just after 4 o'clock, so I'm going to call the April 5th, 2021 Select Board meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Will the clerk please call who's present?
Ms. Escobedo,
Present?
Ms. Ackerman,
Present.
Mr. Johnson,
Present.
Ms. Hotchkiss, and myself, Ms. Bates, present.
Okay, and perhaps Jane will be joining us shortly. Thank you. I'll read the consent agenda. Minutes to approve February 22, 2021, March 1, 2021, March 8th, 2021, and March 8th, 2021, the executive session not to be released, and town accountant warrants for April 1, 2021. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, and will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss, and myself, Ms. Bates.
Okay, that's 4 of our select board members, and Ms. Hotchkiss not present at this time. All right, the town manager's report.
Good evening, everyone. Hope everybody had an enjoyable weekend. So I have the printed report in the packet. I know we have a lot to get to tonight, so I'll be very brief. Just a couple of items that I wanted to note. I think I had reported in a previous meeting about some of the promotional processes that were happening, especially at the fire department, both the captain's promotion and promotion of several lieutenants. And we haven't really singled anyone out because it is there's been multiple promotions through this process, but I did want to note that Lieutenant Lindsay McLaughlin has just started she's been with the fire department for a long time, and she's the first female fire officer in the history of the Concord Fire Department, and I think that's great. I think she earned it because she's a great firefighter, not because she's a great female firefighter. But I just thought that was a significant thing that I think we're proud of her, obviously, but I think it's a great achievement for the department. Also, a quick update on the vaccines. We have been working on the homebound population through our EMTs as well as our Board of Health. And as I noted in my reports, we have about 5,000 residents over the age of 65, and we vaccinated over 4,000 of them. So that process, I think, is going very, very well. We are noticing improvements in the supply chain. Still no word on our regional center or how we're, what the next phases of this are going to be. But I just wanted to note that we are still reaching our senior population very effectively. So in kind of a quirk, our solid waste and recycling program year starts April 1st, which is obviously last week. So that has started. So if you haven't renewed, you need to do that. And then one of our oft talked about projects, the Cambridge Turnpike, is this week starting in the final stages, including some adjustments to some of the work that's been done, like punch list type things, and then final paving. And then last thing I'll just mention is it's a relatively small grant amount, about $28,000, but it's an exciting project that we're working on with the town of Lexington. 2 historic towns, 1 memorable trip. It's being coordinated by our Economic Vitality and Tourism Department. And to be honest with you, there hasn't been a lot that I'm aware of anyway. There has been a lot of kind of structured partnerships with the town of Lexington for shared marketing and promotion. And so this is kind of an exciting thing for us to engage in. And so it's going to be something to look forward to.
Good. Any questions for the town manager? Susan.
Yeah. Hi, Stephen. Thank you for that report in this comprehensive report that you produced. I have 2 questions. One is about in the CPW category, you reported on the Public Works tree guide. Is that available online, or can citizens get a printed copy, or how's that work?
Yes, and actually, I apologize. I was supposed to end with the tree guide because Aaron McCloskey is here, and I completely missed that. Thank you, Susan.
I knew that. I knew that.
Yes, thank you. So Aaron's here to talk about that. It is I have seen it. It's really just a magnificent document, and it's a guide and a poster. And I'll be honest with you, I've never really known that much about trees, and I had the poster and I was looking in my backyard being like, oh, that's what that is. That's what that is. And it really has so much information, but so its brilliance is in its approachability. And so I guess I would turn it over to Aaron to answer any question. Aaron McCloskey, our superintendent for Highway and Grounds for Concord Public Works, to answer questions on that.
Just how to get it. Oh. We can't hear you.
Can't hear you, Aaron.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Town Manager. Thank you. So the Concord Public Works Tree Planting Guide will be available on the town website. We will be putting that on the Concord Public Works page throughout, and also make it available for a news and notice. We're working with Concord printers currently to print hard copies. We have 2,500 copies that are being ordered, and we will be distributing those to local groups, committees, chairs, and they can pass along to their members and have that available hopefully for next week for public distribution.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and just
Susan?
sorry, go ahead, Susan.
Oh, I had one other question on a different topic, but if you were going to.
Yeah, just to follow up, as I noted in the report, it was funded by an MVP grant, Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant. And as you know, the town went through a pretty extent. Kate Henley, I believe, quarterbacked the MVP process for the town. And one of the reasons why the tree guide is so important is because with, municipal vulnerability really deals with the town's resiliency in the face of increased severity of storms. Due to climate change, and trees, as you all know, can be a big threat because of increased infestation, because of warmth, less cold winters and higher winds and things like, and drought, droughts offset by significant rainstorms and those kinds of conditions. So that is the connection between the MVP grant and the tree guide.
Okay.
My other question was about, I think it's been about a month since we heard about the RECC, and I wondered if you'd be giving us an update at some point soon, next week or something.
So we're still waiting here on our grant, but I know that our consultant, Tom Kennedy, who was with us during that discussion, asked us about a governance agreement. And so the next step is to work on kind of a draft governance agreement for both the Town of Acton Select Board and Town of Concord Select Board to consider. And I'll be working on that over the next few weeks with Town Manager Mangiarotti from Acton.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the board members? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to move on to chair's remarks. I'm just going to comment, and I was pleased to see that just before this meeting, the Middle School Building Committee sent out a notice to a large distribution, reminding everyone that the survey for the middle school will close tonight at 11:59. So encouraging as broad a sector as possible to respond to that survey. And that reminder just came out just before the select board meeting. So that's great. I'm going to move on to discussion of the middle school project because we have a number of people here for that purpose. Let me just say that the purpose for this discussion today is, one, to bring the select board, give them an update on what's happened, although many of us have been keeping up with your public forums and other meetings, but it will be an opportunity for all of us to be updated, as well as an opportunity for the select board to ask questions or make comments that may be helpful to the middle school building committee. I want to thank everyone who's been working on this project for a number of months now, many many months now. And I think working hard to get community feedback on this project. It's not unusual that there are various points in the process where community members want to weigh in as they see more detail or more information. And the select board certainly has received a large number of correspondence in the last couple of weeks, as have the middle school building committee and others, I'm sure. So I want to commend everybody for all the work that has been done, both by SMAA and the building committee and the public in terms of trying to keep up with this. I will say that after the select board has a chance to be updated with the presentation today, we will allow opportunity for public comments, but not much beyond 5 o'clock because the select board has a number of other items that they need to attend to today. So that is the process that we anticipate. So I see Dr. Hunter is here from the schools, as well as Pat Nelson and Don Gorella, who are the co-chairs of the middle school building committee. So welcome, and I'm not sure, and I see Kristen Olson also from SMAA. So I'm not sure who wants to open this, but Dr. Hunter, do you want to open the presentation?
Thank you. I think I'm going to turn it over to Pat and Dawn first, just to
Okay, that's fine.
open us up, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, good. Thank you. So John,
Hi, I'll just say hello and thank you for having us. I wasn't sure, Pat and I didn't have this scripted out, but thank you for having us.
it's our pleasure.
Yes, and thank you for the opportunity to give you an update. We do want to commend all the community members who have listened to all the different groups that we've been presenting to, and the community forum that was quite successful last weekend as far as participation and feedback. So we're very much appreciative of that, and look forward to having this discussion on Thursday with the Greater Building Committee. And I don't know if Pat wants to say a few words, and I do think Dr. Hunter and maybe Jared, Dr. Hunter, we're going to do a quick just reminder presentation. So Pat, do you have anything on the heels of saying thanks?
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Linda. Thank you to the select board for having us today. And I just want to say how much we appreciate getting input from the select board and the finance committee as we go through our deliberations as the building committee. As Linda pointed out, this is a logical time in the project that we would get a lot of feedback from the community, and we're getting it now, and we're listening, and we're going to weave it into our decision making and moving forward. So it's been very helpful to hear just the response from the finance committee, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the thoughts of the select board.
Good, thank you. And I'm glad Jared is also here and joining us. Yeah, okay.
Kristen, I'm going to have you pull the slides up because we embedded our background information into your slide presentation. So Jared and I were hoping just to give context as to the history of the project, which many of you were there for, as were we, and we're finding that it's been really valuable the last couple of weeks to remind ourselves of what was communicated and what was formally voted on, what occurred when. So we have a few slides that literally are excerpts from the original documents of some of these activities that are listed here. So town meeting, April 2019, which is when Article 14 was passed, creating the $1.5 million for feasibility and schematic design. Then in May of 2019, you all as a select board created the building committee itself. And so we've just revisited that charge. And then the summer of 2019, we really did a little bit of backward history just to remind ourselves that the range of the budget identified then was just that, was a range, and that was at the middle school building committee level. So Kristen, if you go to the next one. So these are actual slides from town meeting of April 2019. Jared, you can chime in anywhere along the line here. So at that time, we presented the best estimates that we possibly could. And I think it's just really important to remind everyone what we said all through that meeting was that we needed a placeholder. So we had some numbers to work with, knowing that that wasn't necessarily in stone. And Jared can certainly share the process we got to get to the 90 million, but we also knew things could change over the 2 years or coming years to follow. So average school square foot cost was listed, recommended square footage, again, best guess without having done any ed plan or anything. And then escalation to get to the 90 million. Kristen, why don't you go to the next one? Because I think it takes us a little further.
And I'll just chime in on that, just
Sure.
so you all know what we did is at that time, it was around February of 2019, give or take. We had called around to a number of OPMs in the field, a number of design experts in the field, looked at all of the current buildings that were being built, and just got a lot of input from the experts on what they projected square footage would be. And then what we did is we took that square footage amount times what we were expecting the building to be, give or take. And that's how we came up with the $80,000 to $100,000 projection, and 90 being what we were estimating at that time. And what we kept pointing out was the escalation. We were hearing, and everyone kept saying, don't forget to mention this. Every single year, I want to say between 2010 and 2017, MSBA was projecting a 6 to 8% escalation. So just wanted to point that out.
Right. So if you look, oh, go ahead, Kristen, to the next one. So that all said, and I'll just note that the price per square foot was actually higher than what we're actually looking at right now, and the building size was smaller than what we're actually looking now. So that's what happens when you estimate. When you look at the numbers that we have here, you know, an approximate 90 million with 1 and 2 years worth of escalation. So you can see we suspected it might go over the $100 million mark a couple of years down the line. And just to remind you all, we've lost time to COVID here. So we literally are at the 2-year mark, probably more, you know, not that we expected to be. So that's worth noting that COVID has added time for price escalation to matter. There was also an amendment approved as part of that article in 2019, and this is the quote, you know, the actual amendment itself. And what's worth noting in there is that town meeting did approve an all electric design and net zero energy ready building. So I think that's important to keep that as part of our conversations. And then finally, we just wanted to highlight that in this slide where we weighed renovation versus new building, we did indeed mention the community. I know as a building committee, we've had a little discussion over what the priority is. Certainly the priority is that it's a school. However, we did mention community needs being factored in, which is where we find ourselves. The Warren article itself, we've been just trying to clarify that the only thing approved at town meeting was 1.5 million for the purposes of feasibility and schematic design. There was no cost approved. There was no money approved. I know you all know this, but it seems to have become a little point of confusion with the public. So we're just trying to clarify that. When the building committee formed, this should look familiar to a number of you. This is the select board's charge to the committee. So it just frames the work that was to be done. And indeed, it's a group that's going to be advisory in some level in terms of funding and recommendations. And then one discussion that's happened a lot lately as we look at potentials for going over the 100 million is where did that 80 to 100 million come from? This is from the building committee minutes on July 11th. This was part of a discussion we had about putting out the request for services to be able to solidify an OPM on board with the project. You have to put that into the OPM request so that the firms know what they're proposing and what they might be signing on to for a project. So you do end up in a little bit of the chicken and the egg here of, you need to set a range so that the firms you're soliciting know what kind of project they're signing on to, and yet you haven't done the work of the project to firm up the cost. So you can see the consensus of the group was to keep the estimate in the RFS to 80 to 100 million. And that indeed, those numbers have become what the building committee's been using as its budgetary range, and up until this discussion have really worked to stay within that. And so we'll just wrap that up with a quick reference to the proposed educational program. You've seen this slide before. We're really looking at a team model with 3 teams per grade, one team for 3 sections of each grade level with 4 core content teachers. And that allows a school within a school kind of feeling and a smaller atmosphere for kids. And we're not going to spend too much time on that, but we're happy to answer questions. And then a couple of worth noting pieces of where we are right now as we get into this discussion, and then I'm going to turn it over to SMMA. In the ed plan, we have put in for 1 basketball court, a 7,000 square foot gymnasium, which allows for 150 spectators. That does meet the basic needs of our PE program because we can split that in 2 during the school day. And then with the 3rd alternate PE space, we're going to have some flexibility for 3 spaces. Music and performance activities. As you know, we've landed at a 1 grade level auditorium. Just a reminder, we had started with a cafetorium, and through some really hard work with the ed plan and with the design, have been able to move over to the auditorium and still be under the 100 million. That meets many of our needs in terms of having orchestra and band and some of the music spaces and other performance needs. Will it meet every need and all of the needs? No, it will not. We will still need to use the high school for some of those needs. World language does have 5 classrooms. That had been an ongoing discussion back earlier in the winter as to whether that would need to be a compromise. And we're really excited that because of the rigor of that program and the time kids spend in those classrooms, they are dedicated to that program and not having those teachers travel all the time. So that's where the ed plan landed, with some other spaces that I'll just reference here quickly. 2 art rooms, substantially separate program classrooms because of the intensive programs we've built with other small group settings for special ed. The library or media center is also a good size, along with an adjacent maker space that allows for a lot of flexible academic work, hands-on project-based. And we do have a space for our family and consumer science program, as well as our technology engineering programs, both of which require very unique things in the environment so that those programs operate as they have been. And this is where I turn it over to Kristen to talk on how SMMA has translated all of that into an updated conceptual design.
Great. So working with the educational plan, we went to a space summary, and then this is the first visual manifestation of the space summary in these blocks. And those are building blocks for our first conceptual plan. So we've just highlighted in the dashed boxes are those spaces that significantly changed from a year ago. As Lori mentioned, the added auditorium, which was previously a cafetorium, and so on. So I think you're all familiar with that. And then before we went to update the concepts from last year's study to fold in all of what we learned through the educational plan and the revisiting of the space summary, we were aware of the request for a larger gym. So right with our first pass at the conceptual floor plans, we did go ahead and test what it would be to have 1 MIAA size court, which is what we were talking about as the base space summary, the one that meets the educational plan requirements but does not go above and beyond, and then also the gym that's larger with 2 MIAA cross courts and 1 MIAA main court. So we did have those already tested because we were aware of that. Since then, we've of course heard more about the auditorium, which is not reflected in alternatives in design yet. So Then this is just a three-dimensional representation of the building on the site, pushing it to the edge of the flat area at the top with the existing building over here off to the right that will be in operation while this is constructed, having a contiguous green space for fields, and then parking consolidated in close proximity to the community spaces, the main entrance, and off to one side. So I believe Peter Martini is going to speak briefly about the schedule that Hill has developed, or the schedule scenarios.
Sure, Kristen, thanks. Roughly the schedule looks like this. In late 2020 and in 2021, the feasibility study and the schematic design is taking place. Right now we're on schedule, and we're hoping maybe a little bit earlier than May 24th, that feasibility stage would be done if we're looking at the top schedule. And then the schematic design goes into the end of this year. Depending on when the special town election is, we can either proceed a little quicker with the next phase of design, which is the design development, or depending on when the election is, the top shows that being pushed off a little bit into 2022. But 2022 is when the whole plan comes together, the design development is done, and the complete construction documents are completed in 2022. Depending again when those are completed based upon when they start, we'll be bidding the job out to general contractors and subcontractors sometime either the first quarter of 2023 or the second quarter of 2023. We've estimated approximately 17 months for the construction of the building and 4 months to move in, so the students can move in. At that time, the existing building can come down, and there's going to be demolition work and field work that would take place after the red. So that's the high level. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Cost, Kristen? Right now, this is a chart that's on the Massachusetts School Building Authority website. This job isn't being done through MSBA. They've got some really good information on past projects and trying to estimate where projects were and where projects are going. We've currently hit a target for this job to be bid out in 2023 to come in at building costs of $555 a square foot, which would include the site work on top of, and at that dollar amount, you're at $79 or $80 million for the construction. So all these dots, the orange dots are, kind of very clear information of what things have cost. There's bids that are orange but aren't filled in. These are exact jobs. So if you hover over them, the job will pull up of what it is. It's at a high school, a middle school, or an elementary school. There's a wide variety of costs here. We've analyzed these and looked at them and looked at comparable jobs with SMMA and other firms and jobs that Hill are doing, and we feel as though $555 is a proper target to bid in 2023.
Great. So I think a lot of the discussion lately has been on the items that are out we're calling above budget scope. The educational plan and requirements fit in the space summary, and the space summary works within that $100 million budget that we have set out to date. But we did want to shed some detail light on the gymnasium and the auditorium that we've heard so much community feedback about. So we have a little bit of information about the existing gymnasia that the Sanborn and Peabody have. And then Lori already reviewed what we have for the planned gymnasium and athletic space. And so the emphasis is that with the current single MIAA main court that can be subdivided for 2 teaching stations, and then the alternate PE that does meet the educational plan. Similarly, the auditorium, we have recorded here what the existing facilities provide, and then what we provided in the space summary, which is that 1 grade level auditorium or 270 seats. And the way we developed that, and we can speak to it in more detail, is again having interviewed the music department and talked about what curriculum is offered during the day, and if those seats would provide the right baseline. So we did some cost analysis to see what it would be in terms of project costs to grow the gym or grow the auditorium. And we've developed a range of costs that would be needed to add to the project budget to accommodate an additional 80 seats, which would get you to a status quo of the what's existing at the Sanborn, or an additional 280 seats to reach a 2-grade equivalent, for example. So these are the cost ranges that we can see the project landing at if that scope were to be added. Similarly, adding one MIAA court would land us at this cost range, and then a larger but not MIAA cross court, which is 246 by 74 cross courts, is here. This number was provided by CCYB as a good practice size. So that's how we developed this scope. And then also understanding that maybe it's not one or the other of these that the community is interested in hearing about, or the building committee in terms of evaluating. There's also combinations of the larger gyms and the auditoria that we can speak to in more detail with you. But I do believe we want to get on to questions. So I'm going to stop sharing, and we can always pull those up if we want to dive in with more detail.
Linda, I think you're on mute. I think I saw you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Comments or questions from the select board? No wonder I wasn't hearing.
No wonder we were so quiet.
Yeah, I thought that was unusual. All right. I can't see all of you, so okay,
Linda?
Terry, go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you for this presentation, and thank you for going around so many places and giving the same presentation to so many groups. I know that all of you have been working really, really hard on trying to keep the project within the $100 million or the $80 to $100 million budget, and we really appreciate it. Honestly, when I look at what that does to the median tax bill, it's a little bit scary. $1,000 a year is approximately what it would be for the median house. And so I think for me personally, that's like a really upper limit of what I think we can get through the town in the ballot. My question is about the square foot cost. So the thing I'm confused about is, Lori, I thought I just heard you say that during the 2-year COVID period, the cost per square foot actually decreased. We had been estimating 6.8% or 7% construction inflation. And then during the last 2 years, it actually came down a little from that, if I heard you right. So if that's the case, what I don't understand is why we didn't come down from the $90 million approximate estimate.
Jared, do you want to answer the first part of that at least?
Did you say Peter, Lori?
I don't know. I was going to throw it to Jared, but Peter, I'm sure you can answer it too. So maybe both of you.
Well, the beginning part, my understanding is that there was estimates done. Hill wasn't on board at the time. Were estimates done on sample projects per square foot, and then the amount of square feet. So the reason it didn't come down was upon further analysis, the cost per square feet originally was a little too high, but when the design was done, the square footage went up. So therefore, the price didn't go down.
Right. Uh-huh. And again, remember the square footage number was solicited from OPMs that Jared had, connections with, who had no scope of the educational program we run. And we know that our program requires additional space. The fact that 5 world language programs is even a need is very unusual in a middle school. The music program is deep. The art program is deep. et cetera. The team model's certainly going to have some square footage attached. So it was all of those factors adding together. And we do now have an auditorium and a 7,000 square foot gymnasium within the square footage. So all those factors added into the beyond estimate number.
And I'll just say back in 2019, we just worked again with a bunch of OPM's designs in other districts, and the average square foot was just under 650. So that was the number that we plugged in.
Linda, I don't know whether you can see me.
I can now. Hi, Jane.
Hi, and sorry, this has been a bad day for computers here. So I'm on multiple devices. I don't know where I'm being seen or where I'm being heard. I had a couple of observational questions. One, I wanted to just ask how clear the building committee is, or where the basis for future enrollment numbers are coming from in terms of students. And as much as I agree with what Terry said, and I understand that it's going to be up to Concord to figure out how to swallow this, I also, having recently, well, not too long ago, had two children go through Peabody, I'm aware that we're up against a wall. We don't really have an option in terms of building something because the buildings we have are not worth retrofitting. And I am concerned that we are dancing on the head of a pin with $100 million, which is not to say I want to spend more, but how accurate do we think that target really is?
I can answer the enrollment part and then we go from there. So we worked really closely with SMMA, looking at actual enrollments, looking at NESDEC projections, and really studying patterns. That said, we always have to review and continue to modify that because things change. So what we landed at was what we project to be an actual enrollment based on the kids that are currently in the elementary schools. And of course, the census is a guide too, always a piece, but not a absolute guide. To really come to a 650 student expectation, knowing we likely also need to factor in for growth, whether it be housing starts, private school returns, because we're a pretty unique community to have so many private school options within town. And our families are very fluid, frankly. And we partner with the private schools as a result of that, but we do expect that of the, couple hundred kids that we have out in privates, more will stay within the middle school. So the team model is probably the last piece that builds in some buffer to that. The 700 students translated into the team model, where we're working with a low class size of just at 19 or 20, knowing if we had to, those classrooms can accommodate a few more kids. So we've tried to build in some buffer without overbuilding. But to your point, Jane, that's a number that we need to continually to look at. And we know COVID has had some impact on the housing market, and look at what that outcome may be. But there is some cushion there without going too far with the cushion.
So Dr. Hunter, if I could just do a follow-up question on that. So that's, with all the factors that you identified, that's based on our preschool kindergarten numbers at this point?
Yep, the kids that are in the lower grades that would actually enter into the middle school. And as well as the census, the births in town, which also helped us to predict our enrollments, but also trying to navigate all those, those are the concrete factors. We can actually count kids that we know of. Sure. It's the projections that are the tricky part. So we've been really trying to work with Hill and SMMA and through the NESDEC projections, which studies all those other variables to try to do our best to come to some level of cushion without overbuilding.
Thank you.
And to follow up then on the cost estimate number, as far as what we know today, we do believe that the scope proposed can be achieved within the cost per square foot that we are targeting. The wild card is the COVID economy impacts. I think that we have used estimates and escalation based on, again, what we're seeing in projects that we are getting estimates back on. We've done a lot of research on projects that are as close to comparable as possible. That being said, there's none that are apples to apples. But we do believe with diligence and careful material selection, we can provide the building at the target cost per square foot. Again, the only thing that no one ever knows, and I was actually on a cost call earlier today, is what the economy will do in the next year. We've been getting very aggressive bids lately. It could swing dramatically in the other way. It could remain level. It could, stay low. It's one of those things that these are very unique times. But based on what we have, we would be confident in that number.
Yeah, and I would add to that, Kristen, that, Jared's analysis was good. And when you're looking at 6% increases every year, we have found the last 2 years have been about 3%. So, and that's what we're anticipating going forward. We're looking at some work right now where the price of right now bidding, if there's a lot of steel or wood on a project, the prices are spiking just in 2021 due to shortages of those materials and factories closing down. It's a good estimate. We did it based upon cost of building and then cost of site, and then added contingencies to it, and then comparing it to some of the other projects we are doing, and then plotted it on the MSBA map. We really weren't using the MSBA map to plot it. We plotted it on there. So we're feeling as good as you can feel about it.
Other questions or comments from the select board? Susan?
Hi, yes, thank you all, Dr. Hunter and the committee, for all of your work. It looks like it's going to be a great school. I don't think there's any question about having to have a new school because of the condition of Peabody and Sanborn. But my concern about the cost is that this is not the last excluded debt project that the town is going to face. It's the last school. It'll complete the renovation of all the elementary schools, the high school, and now the middle school. But we have a set of municipal buildings that need attention, and there will be some capital costs associated with that. And there was a comprehensive report done, and I know we're not at the stage where we're picking what happens when and how much, although that process has begun. But all of the town buildings are older than any of the school. I mean, once the middle school is done, I think Alcott is 15 years old, maybe. Mm-hmm. And the municipal buildings are all far older. So I just want to keep that context that this is an important project, a necessary project, but it isn't the last project that we're going to get added on to our property tax because of excluded debt. So I think we need to keep that in mind.
Okay. Matt.
So I guess my question might be for the finance director, which is that I think Concord has a great tradition of supporting excellence in public education and in paying for it. And this school, I think, is no exception to that. I think, there's really almost visionary in its approach to the team teaching model. And I think so far with the space recommendations that the committee has approved, that everything in the educational plan is provided for. And I think that's appropriate. I think that on the other hand, when it comes to community needs, I think Concord has an equally strong tradition of finding co-funding sources, and those either being public-private partnerships, being state grants, being CPA funds, or user fees. And, among those different sources, we either provide the full cost or a significant portion of the cost. And I'm just trying to think, in this case, I have not seen any proposals to have any of those external funding sources co-fund the additional elements that are beyond the educational plan. So is there any precedent in Concord of using debt exclusion bonds for this type of additional development?
I can jump into a little of that, and some of you know the stories better than I. Certainly, there was a partnership at the high school where private funding and CPA combined funded the fields. That was at a different point in the project, and you could peel off the fields and not have to try to keep the design moving while you did that. So I think that's just worth noting. And obviously, the library is a partnership, as was Beatty. So there's been a few anecdotal feeler conversations about private. I don't see any around me anyway. There is not a momentum to go raise the kind of dollars you saw in the slides. User fees, we know a lot about user fees. We do that pretty typically and raise very little funds, frankly. So something, and frankly, still get concerns from the community about the cost of the fees and the custodians and those sort of things. So we would already need to be in a model of how does the community have access to the school without it being expensive enough to up the fees that they pass along to the users. So we don't see an immediate answer in any of those. And I think the trickiness of this particular discussion is the timing, because Kristen, your team is really looking for a decision by when?
May, to stay on schedule.
Yeah.
We need to have the decision before we start schematic design.
Yeah.
So if schematic design is supposed to start in May, then that's when.
So that's not a no, Matt. That's just there's nothing imminently in front of us with that kind of timeline attached.
So if I could follow up on that, are you getting any initial data on the survey that would guide you in any way at this point? And I realize it's still open until midnight tonight, but is there any indication of?
Yeah, I have not actually reviewed it for anything other than how many people have answered it. So I can't say anyone's looked at the data yet. We were waiting for it to close, Linda, but certainly we will when it closes tonight.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, if I could just jump in, I think Lori's right. The fact is we have to commit to a design to go forward, and that commitment can't be kind of a conditional commitment. Like if the money materializes, we're going to do it this way. If the money doesn't, we're going to do it the other way. We have to schematically design a building, and I think that's one of the challenges we've had even over the last few weeks. And that's why the middle school building committee has wanted to come to the finance committee and the select board for guidance. In terms of this is the place the committee got to based on the ed plan, the recommendations of the designers, and here's this feedback we're getting from the community since then. And what do we think? How do we want to move forward? And the thing I want to say is, this is a completely normal part of a large scale building project, both the budget, going from somewhat unfocused to getting more focused. And sometimes that means it goes up. The more you design, the more you learn, it goes up. Then there are times it goes back down because of you're eliminating the need for high contingencies and things like that. But this is all a very normal part of the process. And so I think both the initial design recommendation with the 7,000 square foot gym and the 1 grade auditorium, that the process that yielded that recommendation, as well as the feedback we're getting in this process are all, like I said, I think this is pretty common. And so I want to commend the building committee for being open and attuned to the feedback we're getting, and for the select board and finance committee for kind of hearing the committee out on where things could go.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the select board at this point? Okay, I'm at this point going to open it up for any public comment, but as I said, we are going to need to close this around 5 o'clock. I would ask that if you have a comment that you state your name and address, and we have heard from many of you, and so if as each speaker wants to come forward, we would appreciate it if you would just bring new ideas or comments to the fore in the interest of time. All right. So is there anyone from the public that would like to speak?
Linda, could I?
Carlin.
Thank you. Carlin Reed, 83 Whitsand. We're building a middle school that will last us at least 50 years. I would recommend that the select board think beyond the immediate cost. Don't be penny wise, but pound foolish, and do build a middle school that's big enough to meet the educational plan as well as the community needs. Lately, you've seen an outpouring of support for an expanded gym as well as the expanded auditorium. And I personally would support both of them. I recommend the select board seriously consider that, think beyond the immediate and look to the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlin. Anyone else that would like to speak? Jeremy, can you help and assist if you see someone who has their hand up?
Sure, we have Pamela Dritt. Pamela, you can unmute yourself and say your name and address, please.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green, Unit 4. I want to second the urge to build the larger auditorium. It would be needed for not just for graduation ceremonies, but for yearly musical theater productions and for evening musical and theater productions by the entire community. We need more professional theater size areas. And we also need to consider what the cost would be not to do it in terms of things that we don't get to use. As a question, I would like to know what kind of air conditioning and is it going to be heat pump technology used, and would it be air conditioning?
Thank you, Pamela. Who would like to answer her question?
At this time, the mechanical system is planned to be an air source heat pump or a VRF.
Yay.
Okay, good. Anyone else who would like to make a comment or suggestion?
Mary Hartman has her hand raised.
Okay, Mary.
Thank you, Linda. Hi, this is Mary Hartman. I live at 16 Concord Green. As you know, I'm the chair of the Finance Committee, but I really am speaking just for myself tonight. Before I retired, I taught business at Bentley University, and one of the courses that we taught was a course that helped businesses grow or solve problems. And we used surveys extensively. And my experience with surveys is that they are a great way to learn consumer preferences. But as you know, they're not a good way to set policy. And we've got a whole process that we use in order to set policy. And I just want to make sure that we use surveys wisely and not use them to set policy. And certainly a survey isn't going to help us figure out how to pay for the school, which I think is what we're talking about now. So I just want to temper our expectations of the survey. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I see Henry Dane's hand. Ma'am.
Yes, thank you. I think all these things that the school committee wants to do are wonderful. And the problem isn't so much the cost, it is how we're going to pay for it. And I think at this point, we really need to start thinking about how we are going to pay for it, because the expected $1 increase in the property tax rate is going to be a difficult thing to swallow, especially if we have a continuing concern about affordable housing and the impact that raising taxes to pay for projects of this kind as on the social and economic environment of this town. And I think that the discussion at this point needs to start turning from what we are going to include in the project to how we're going to pay for it. And if I think that there are several pieces to this. One, obviously, is to be conservative about the scope of the program. Another is to find alternative ways to contribute to the cost. And nothing has been said about what we are going to be doing with the existing Peabody real estate. And that is a resource that I think we should consider using to pay for part of the cost of this. It is real estate that has great value. There's real estate that can be sold. There's real estate, when sold, the proceeds can be used to contribute toward the cost of the project, and the continuing income from the taxes payable on that can also help with the debt service. Another thing we ought to think about is what contribution the school committee can make to the cost of this project. For instance, it was said that combining the two schools would save $548,000 a year in the costs that result from running two separate schools. I think it's reasonable to think or to say that that money that is saved ought to go toward the cost of carrying the debt for this project. Also, I don't know what happened to the $6 million that was put in reserve for emergency repairs that might be needed for the roof, the plumbing, and septic systems. But again, we ought to think about taking some of that money, if it was a real need and was budgeted for, and putting that toward the cost. I think we really have to start to be creative about other sources of funding that are related to this project. And if we find ourselves in a situation where it really is going to cost the average taxpayer $1,000 a year, we have to think about how we can deal with the burden that imposes on people. And I think that this is an occasion to give serious thought to the residential exemption and taxation, which would shift the burden of the heavy tax load of this project from the lowest value housing up the economic scale, so that we don't push people living in affordable housing now out of town in order to pay for this project. These are just some thoughts that I think we should start thinking about, as well as what the program is going to be.
Okay, thank you, Henry. Okay. Anyone else who would like to make a comment? Okay. So may I ask, is it likely that the outcome of the survey will be discussed at your next Thursday meeting?
Yes, that's the plan.
Okay. Okay. And another question I would ask is that the Finance Committee, as at least one of you already mentioned, had a thoughtful discussion and offered some guidance, I guess I would call it, and suggestions in terms of how to think about this. Will the financial trade-offs, I guess I would say, or response to some of the suggestions that were made at the FinCom be also discussed at the next meeting?
Yes, I think the intent is that we will bring all of our recent meetings, discussions, feedback we've received as part of a communications update that will basically outline what we've been hearing. So, yes.
Okay. And And then one other question. I know that your communications subcommittee has done an incredible job trying to reach out. I would guess that reaching out to the broader public, however, as opposed to the school age public, has been more challenging. And I'm wondering if someone could just speak to that a little bit.
That is always more challenging, as you know, Linda. And but I think that the communications subcommittee, which is Kate Hanley and Heather Bout, have done an amazing job of finding every committee in town and every group in town that we can either that we've either gone to and spoken with or gotten on their mailing lists and requested that they send the survey links out to their mailing lists. It's been in the paper. I think that in all the years that I've been in Concord, that this group has done a really yeoman's job of trying to reach the broader population. But I will agree with you, it is difficult, and it's difficult to get the attention of people who are not necessarily thinking about the schools right now. But it's not for want of trying.
Yeah. Well, I did start with recognizing the effort that has gone on. I just know that this is a difficult piece of it, and to not feel as though we've left every stone unturned will come back to us later, as we move forward. So I appreciate the efforts that have gone into this. Yeah. Okay.
Linda?
Yes.
So I just wanted to make a quick comment, but I know we want to move on. I think the ideas about kind of project offsets, I think we talked about them. I can't remember if we talked about them at the Finance Committee, but I know that they came up at the public forum, specifically about Peabody. And so we have actually talked about that a little bit publicly, but I think the central issue is timing of when we would need to commit to the project and a general contract and the bond, and when we need to commit to the bonding versus when those revenue sources would be available. But I do think that the point is very well taken on both, because it ends up being an indirect contribution to offset the cost on the general fund side in most cases. But in terms of, Peabody is still going to be in operation as a school for about 2 years after we bond the money. If this presumes vote, positive votes at the town meeting and ballot box, but if all that goes through, we would need to bond the money, and then Peabody would still be a school. And I think at that point, it'd be difficult to really commit to what could that site truly, be. If we committed to using proceeds of the sale of Peabody as a direct offset to debt service, it would really limit the options for, say, for example, a municipal use for the Peabody site. So I just want to kind of clarify that if and when the parcel does get sold and there are taxes generated from it, it does increase revenue for the whole town, which does offset the amount that would need to be taxed just for level services. So I did just want to kind of throw that out there, that we are thinking about it and talking about it. It is more of a timing issue.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I'll take one, if there's any additional comment from select board members, I'll entertain that. And if not,
I just wanted to comment just as a liaison to the Community Preservation Committee. When, we have less than $2 million worth of spending in a typical year, and we have an entire year-long process in which we scrutinize and vet those projects. And, when I look at the proposed additional spending here, it's a very ad hoc process. And I just feel it doesn't feel very Concord to me. And we're yet talking about spending more money than we would spend through the CPA in a given year.
Okay. I think at your next meeting, Middle School Building Committee has a lot of work to do. Hopefully it'll be informed with more data that's come in from the survey. I think you've heard the additional comments tonight from the public. and hopefully some more fine tuning with the financial aspect of this in terms of what can be worked out or forecasted will shed some additional light on this. I did hear the comment about future need and taking that into consideration, future community needs. So that's yet another thing that all of you heard and will have to factor into your deliberations. So thank you very much. I'm not sure we've helped solve any of your tough decision and conversation that's ahead, but it's another version of feedback for you. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. We appreciate it.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, I think we're going to move
Take care.
to the next agenda item. As all of you know, the legislature recently passed a major climate bill that was entitled "An Act Creating the Next Generation Roadmap for Massachusetts Climate Policy." There is a lot to be worked. There are a lot of directives in that climate bill for the state, and some benchmarks and some check-in points along the way. There will be regulations that need to be promulgated. And despite the concern that's been expressed publicly about all of those targets being met, we still need to understand some key components of this and the impact specifically that we can see more immediately for Concord. Kate Hanley, our Sustainability Director, and Dave Wood, our CMLP Director, are here today to help us with that conversation. So Kate and Dave, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, and that was a great summary of the bill. It's passed, as you all know, as you submitted a letter of support in February to sign the bill. But Stephen asked us to just give you a quick update on, it passing and what's in the final bill. So I'll just give a quick recap, and then Dave can chime in with what's relevant to the light plant. But just to recap on the kind of time frame, in February, you all submitted a letter of support. That was for the first version of the bill that was passed by the legislature. Governor Baker vetoed that bill in January, and that was at the very end of the legislative session. So that meant that the new legislative session had to pass the bill again. There wasn't an opportunity for amendments or any back and forth there. So they did just that. They sent it back to the governor. The governor then made some suggested amendments. They accepted some of them, rejected some of them, and on Friday, March 26th, the governor signed the final bill. So I shared with you a summary of the bill that was provided by MAPC. There's many other summaries, but I thought that was a nice and concise version of what's in the bill. It is quite extensive and expansive. It covers new greenhouse gas reduction targets for the state. It covers a lot of things around buildings, environmental justice, renewable energy, job creation, gas safety. But some of the things that I just wanted to kind of point out that I think are most relevant to Concord and will help us meet our climate goals. It has a couple things that tackle some of the challenges with setting standards for new construction. One of which is that it will require the Department of Energy Resources to set a net zero opt-in stretch code. And it also adds energy experts to the BBRS board that sets the building code. So that will address standards for new construction. And it also has a number of items in there that will help with energy efficiency of existing buildings. It's requiring that Mass Save now consider the social costs of climate change in its recommendations. And it has some language around new appliance efficiency standards and other energy efficiency improvements. It also has some language around EV adoption, electric vehicles, and requires that the state set some targets and then create incentives in order to meet those. And then a few other things that I think are kind of relevant to us at a larger scale is that it allocates a lot of more funding to Mass CEC for green jobs. So that will just help the statewide market for green employers and green jobs. And then it establishes a pilot program for geothermal heat pump micro districts, which I think is just a step in the right direction of transitioning to a cleaner energy state. And then it also sets renewable energy requirements for municipal light plants. So I'll let Dave chime in there if there's anything specific that he wants to share as it relates to MLPs.
I think the important thing is the climate bill recognizes the importance of the MLPs and the Commonwealth's clean energy future. With 41 MLPs representing hundreds of thousands of residents, Section 33 of the new law formalized the clean energy work that some of us have already been underway with. So, that's important. The act creating the next generation roadmap for Massachusetts climate policy sets statewide emissions limits, compiling a comprehensive roadmap plan for each limit and producing regular reports on how well the plan's doing. And it also creates a first-time greenhouse gas emissions standard for municipal light plants, requiring them to purchase 50% of non-emitting electricity by 2030 and to get to net zero by 2050. So, we've never had that before, and now we do.
And Dave, how do you measure up? How does the CMLP measure up against that standard at this point?
We're already beyond the 2030 deadline with our emissions reduction. So, and we have a much more aggressive approach to getting to carbon free with our power supply. So, I feel pretty good about that. I feel good that we're already over the 50% for 2030, and we'll just keep working towards the net zero.
Very good. I gave you the lead so you could comment on that. So there you go. Any comments or questions from select board members? We're going to be hearing a lot more about the details on all this as we go along, Matt.
Yeah, so I was interested, of course, about the new net zero building code. And it sounds like that's not yet available. It's going to be developed over the next 18 months. Then we'd have a chance to take a look at it and decide whether Concord would like to adopt such a thing. And the same thing with, how about the geothermal micro districts? Is that something, again, it's a future initiative, not a current? We couldn't go out and draw up a micro district today if we wanted to.
Unfortunately, no. I think it's a pilot program. I don't know all the details of that. I haven't finished reading all of the text of the bill. It is quite extensive. But my understanding is that it's going to fund some pilot programs that I think will be interesting to watch. And you're right, Matt, about the net zero stretch code. It's going to take at least 18 months for the DOER to set the stretch code. We don't know what it's going to be yet. And so, we'll stay tuned for that, but it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
I had a question.
Jane.
In terms of, but we both have an article coming to town meeting on our own building code. So I wanted to know, how does that promote us towards being ready for this legislation to take statewide effect? And also, I believe the pilots are being done for the micro districts, or first geothermal micro districts are first being used by Eversource and then National Grid. So, I would assume that we're going to learn a lot more from what they experienced, just like we did with Mass Save, so that we can produce programs that were hopefully even better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think to your question, Jane, about kind of, the article that's going to be on the warrant for town meeting this year for a home rule petition and bylaw for all electric new construction, the questions come up of like, does this climate bill change our strategy? And the short answer is no, because we don't know what the net zero code is going to be yet. We don't know if it's going to include all electric. We don't know exactly when it's going to be available for implementation, but what we do know now is that all electric new construction is practical and cost effective. So it makes sense to move forward with that article no matter what. And, we'll just be ahead of the curve if when the net zero stretch code comes out, we'll already be moving in that right direction.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Well, I just would like to follow up on that and just ask, though, if you were a state legislator and you were looking at our request for home rule and you had just passed this and knew that a net zero stretch code was under development, I mean, would you be very motivated to grant our home rule petition? It just, it just doesn't, it seems like they would feel like, well, we're already heading down that road. Why would we take this by lane?
It's a good question, Matt. I mean, I'm not a state legislator, so I can't say for sure, but I do know, we've had conversations with Senator Barrett, who was one of the key sponsors of this bill, and he's supportive of this home rule petition approach. I think if nothing else, the fact that Lexington's already passed this same approach at town meeting, there's a dozen other communities that are taking the same approach. It sends the message that communities want an all-electric component to the net zero stretch code. So whatever happens at the State House, we've made it clear what Concord needs to do to meet its goals, and are in alignment with many other communities that are trying to achieve the same goals in their communities and are very much aligned with the new targets that are set out in the climate bill.
Okay. Good question. And we'll just have to stay tuned on that one. But all these bills that are home rule petitions that are likely to be if they're passed by their respective town governments, as you point out with the number, being at least a half dozen, the content could actually inform and, encourage people in terms of what needs to be included in the regulations. Much less to enact the committees or the designated people to do the work, because there's some question about the degree of cooperation going forward and getting all this accomplished. All right. Any other comments or questions? You were both very good to come today, given all the unknowns at this point, but at least we're alerting everybody to that this has passed and that there's going to be a fair amount of activity, we hope, around all this that we need to stay aware of. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. The next item is regards the Concord Independent Battery approval of events. As some of the select board members already know, annually, the select board is required to review the quote events that the battery expects to be involved in for the next season. And that season is defined as from now to a year from now, actually. And also to make sure that all the components are in place in terms of member attestation about no alcohol 24 hours before any event that they're going to participate in, have they had their training, is the insurance covered, et cetera. So I know that Chris Carmody is here today. I don't know if anyone from the battery is also here, but Chris has been involved in this piece. Chris, are you still with us?
Linda, so Chris had to jump off for a commitment, but he did let me know that they have fulfilled all of the requirements as outlined in the contract the select board approved last year. So they should be good to go on that end.
Okay. And I want to acknowledge that I believe it's Peter Mayette is from the battery is here. And yes. I apologize if I mispronounced your last name.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter, did you want to say anything? Welcome.
No, we've followed everything, all the commitments that we are required to do, we have done. The training, we're still presently training and with the COVID going on, we're doing our social distancing and we're training every Monday and Tuesday night to get caught up with everything. And prior to this pandemic, we had all the hours throughout the year. And so we're trying again. We should have all the hours prior to the 19th. The ceremonies that we'll be doing is the 19th, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, and any unfortunate funerals that may come up in the process as well.
Okay, very good. All right. I think we're ready for a motion. And Susan, that motion may need to be extended to cover Memorial Day, Veterans Day, and what else did you say, Peter?
Any unfortunate funerals that may come up.
Yes, right. Thank you.
So, if I can just jump in, I want to make sure that specifically for Patriots Day, it is a non-public event.
Yes.
And some we don't know about I mean, hopefully those others that you mentioned, Peter, will become public events, but I think we need to have some flexibility in case for whatever reason the restrictions on gatherings is not yet lifted.
Yes, no, we actually, we had masks all made for the Battery members, so everybody will be in proper protocol.
Yep, very good. Susan, are you ready to?
I am.
Thank you.
Move to authorize the select board chair to approve the firing of cannons for Patriots Day, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, and if necessary, funerals as defined by the contract with Concord Independent Battery at a date and time to be determined.
Thank you very much. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo.
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss.
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
And myself, Ms. Bates. Aye.
Okay. That's unanimous and the chair so declares. Thank you, Peter, for being here today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you for the work you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. The next item is the Pollinator Health Advisory Committee charge revision. Let me just comment that, as everyone knows, there is a citizen petition. Oh, yeah. Susan?
I just wanted to note,
Boy Scouts come before that. The Eagle Scouts are on the agenda.
Thank you very much. So it's come to our attention recently that the Massachusetts Spirit of Adventure Council Troop 132 had 4 members attain the rank of Eagle Scout, which is really quite an accomplishment during this past school year. And so they have, that's tremendous. We did reach out rather late last week to see if they could be here for personal recognition, but that was not possible. But what we would like to do is have a motion to authorize the chair to send a letter of congratulations on behalf of the select board to each one of these members. And I'll just read their names. Nolan Roberts, Kevin O'Neill, Lucas Anthony, and Simon Kadavid. So congratulations to those 4 Eagle Scouts, quite an accomplishment.
Move to authorize the chair to write a congratulatory letter to the outstanding Scouts who have achieved Eagle Scout status this year.
Okay, do I hear a second? Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo.
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman.
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss.
aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
And myself, Ms. Bates. Aye.
That's unanimous and the chair so declares.
And Linda, if I could just preempt the next one, I don't know whether you've seen the email, you or Jeremy, that I sent very close to the start of the meeting.
I have not, so go ahead.
There was a request from several members of the former Pollinator Health Advisory Committee that we delay this discussion by a week.
All right.
They wanted to make further edits from their perspective on the draft charge, or at least offer some more input.
Okay. I think that's reasonable. And I was going to begin with my introduction previously that we all know that there's a citizen petition that's on the warrant article related to neonicotinoids, which is separate and apart from reinstating this particular committee. So I certainly see no difficulty in postponing this for a week to get some additional input on that. And just ask, is everyone else comfortable with that? Yeah, I see heads nodding. So we will do that. So thanks, Jane, for bringing that before we got involved in the discussion. Okay.
Linda, question also, I see that in the draft charge, one of the members is supposed to be from the Agricultural Committee. I noticed that on Friday and tried to invite them to this meeting, but it doesn't look like anyone could attend. So I just ask that when we do take this up, if it's next week or whatever week, if we make sure that the Ag Committee knows about it, make sure that they do want to participate in the committee.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I suppose and that would apply to the NRC as well, that's mentioned in that charge. And any other formal committee should be notified. So Jeremy, if you'll note that, that would be great. Jeremy?
Yes, I will. Sorry about that. I was muted.
Yep, that's all right. Yeah, okay. Okay, so we will table that item till next week. I think we're ready for committee nominations.
Tourism Director Beth Williams, Senior Planner Heather Gill, and Historical Commission Representative Nancy Nelson to the Battle Road Scenic Byway Committee for terms to expire on April 30th, 2023. Mark Giddings of 474 Barrett's Mill Road as the Hanscom Field Advisory Committee representative for a term to expire on April 30th, 2024.
Okay, and committee appointments.
Move to appoint Amy Robinson of 19 Loring Road to the West Concord Advisory Committee Subcommittee of the Planning Board for a term to expire on April 30th, 2024. Marie Foley, Concord Chamber of Commerce representative to the Economic Vitality Committee to fill an unexpired term set to expire April 30th, 2022.
Okay.
Second.
And will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss?
Aye.
Myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
Can I ask a quick question? Because in my 6 years on the select board, I have never heard of the Battle Road Scenic Byway Committee. And either that means I'm asleep at the wheel or this is.
So I think it probably predated you, Jane. That's why we put the item in the packet, the agreement. Yeah, I think it goes back to 2013.
Right.
And so I had heard of the committee, but that document formalized it for me. So, yeah.
Okay. Is this a reconstituting of a committee that had lapsed?
No, I think it's.
Well, it's not a Concord Town Committee, is it? It's a cross-town organization.
Correct.
Multiple towns, yeah.
Well, I was confused about this also. Does this have to do with the grant that Beth Williams got coordinating Lexington, or does it have to do with the
separate and apart?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to do with any particular item in our agenda tonight?
Except the appointments.
Yeah.
The appointments that we just made.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I think we're ready for committee liaison reports.
Susan had her hand up.
Start off. It's a short report. I only have a couple things. The Trails Committee met on April 2nd, and they're very busy. One of the things they're going to do is Madison Field is it's a nesting area for bobolinks. Right now there's a trail that goes down the middle of the field, and that's going to be moved to the perimeter. Also, they mentioned that there should be, if there isn't, there will be signs reminding people that April 1 to July is Dogs on Leash Day because of the nesting that's going on. The Battle Road Farmhouse Connector Trail, Mass Audubon offered 4 options for construction, and there's $300,000. I'm not sure if it's from Mass Audubon. That's what my notes say for permitting process. That's a long-term project, but they hope to have it done by the 2025 celebration. The trail guide, which some of us already had, and it's really a great document, has been issued, and they had a discussion about whether the trail guide dispensers that are on the signs for the town trails. And there was a discussion about whether or not there were some members that didn't want to eliminate the paper maps, but perhaps make them smaller because of the printing costs. But they ended up keeping that an open issue for now because there wasn't a consensus on it. They discussed the last half mile, or the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, about the end of the trail. And I guess the fencing, the DOT said they would put up fencing, this is around White Pond, where there's a danger, like a hillside where someone could injure themselves. But they weren't going to put put as much fencing up as had been wanted. But now generally the trails are in great shape because even despite all these windstorms, because they have great trail. Bob White is like trail man. Let me see. Oh, there are beavers in Punkatassett. And there's some trash in back of the building. The trail people monitor a variety of things, but it's a building on Domino Drive. I think it's the Gold's Gym building, but somebody's dumping stuff back there, so they're going to perhaps put up a camera. I see that Cord is here. I didn't know if he wanted to say anything more about the trail that you're so involved in.
Yeah, if I'm permitted, just very briefly, this is the mile-long trail that we have only proposed, no permitting completed yet. That's just getting underway. It will be private fundraising, independent fundraising. The trail, about a mile long in length, will go north-south and connect the Battle Road Trail and the Thoreau House. So it will be tremendous benefit to the Virginia Road folks who want access to the center of town, and certainly to birders. It's not expected to be attractive for bicyclists, nor do we want it to be, because there's some sensitive wetland there, and in that sensitive wetland would be the major cost that's involved to meet DEP requirements to cross a 300-foot section of wetland. And the thinking is that although it's a very sensitive area, we're not going to protect wetlands if we don't understand what wetlands are. So we think it's a responsible way to both build a trail and provide some environmental education for visitors. But certainly it's got tremendous historic value too, connecting Battle Road and the Thoreau House. So thanks for including it in your report, Susan.
Welcome.
Yeah.
I just had one other thing to report on. It wasn't a committee meeting. It was Concord CAM had a meeting on March 30th about net carbon sink. A woman named Sharon McGregor gave a very interesting talk about ecosystem restoration, and she cited there's the Tidmarsh site in Plymouth is one example where the natural ecosystem was restored, and she had a lot of suggestions about how each of us in our own backyards could do this sort of thing, restore native plants, and instead of having that pristine green lawn. And someone asked a question about whether plant-based diet helped, and she said absolutely. So for your consideration, I think if you go on the Concord CAN website, you may be able to view it. That's it.
Susan, can I just ask a follow-up question? That is, the moving the trail at Madison Fields to the perimeter, is that temporary only?
Oh, no, I think it's permanent. It's permanent.
Okay. All right, thank you. Who would like to go next? Jane.
It was important to unmute before raising one's hand. I had 2 meetings that were of note this past week. The first was the White Pond Advisory Committee meeting, which has often had some, has been a off again, on again contention space. And yet I really want to compliment everybody within the town management and senior management team, because the neighborhoods have been far more verbally appreciative of the work that has gone on from the town to listen and be responsive to the neighborhood's concerns, both with the White Pond Beach improvements, as well as with increasing ranger participation this summer, and generally the responsiveness of the town. This was a meeting that focused on predominantly, it was a meeting between the advisory committee and Officer Ron Holsinger, who I've already said thank you to or complimented vis-a-vis Stephen and Chief O'Connor, because he was truly an example of community policing. There was a very, very robust discussion about concerns specifically focusing around Dover Street and the Sachem's Cove parking and access point in anticipation of a busy summer. It was a lengthy conversation. There were a lot of things brought up that I think are better left to focus at piecemeal. But the gist of it was also included in a report brought forth by one of the Dover Street neighbors on behalf of the neighborhood group on issues and an action plan, which they came up with in September of 2020. And one, I just want to say it's pretty responsive when a community not only comes together around the issues, but also is productive and has an action plan. And it has, it summarizes 3 parts: enforcing existing regulations, procedures, and laws, which they had done an extensive amount of research on, and which I don't want to report on at this point, because I know that it was the first time I'd heard of this, and it was also the first time that Officer Holsinger had heard of this. The second piece, and really the most robust opportunity, is education of those who potentially come to visit and don't know the rules, including inviting, positive uses and correcting and heading off misinformation in the digital, print, and social media. In other words, taking some responsibility for actually looking at what's out there and attempting to re-educate. And then the final piece was just, 3 short-term, long-term, and how can the community help, thoughts on moving forward. So again, we can review this at a later date when it's settled in. This was the first I'd seen of it. And I know that it was shared with Deputy Town Manager Kate Hodges and Delia, but I haven't heard back from any of the town staff on this. And before I report on it, I think it's better to let the conversation take another level. And then the other committee I have to report on was the Historic Districts Commission, which had its regular discussions of contracting signs. It's always fascinating to see the detail we want to approach in the kind of signage, even if it's temporary within the historic districts. And then there was a discussion over the Concord Home for the Aged and some improvements there to remove the existing metal fire escape, which was unanimously supported. And then discussions over 155 Monument Street and 98 Monument Street, both of which were really engaged conversations. And with that, I think that's, I know, I'm sorry. There was also a discussion of 59 Walden Street, which I believe was was it the Verizon building? And it has been purchased by, I believe it's a real estate company, and there's a proposal to put a second floor clapboard, and the early architectural renderings that were being discussed would indicate a strong intent to conform the building to its neighborhood. And that too was looked forward to with some excitement by the HTC. Thanks.
Thank you, Jane. Terry.
Jane, I have a question on, based on what you just said, and possibly you and or Stephen might want to answer today or in the future, in the near future. And this is, thanks for reminding us about the Ranger. I guess it's getting toward that time of year where we have to think about plans for the Rangers at White Pond and Esbrook and maybe even somewhere else. Is this something, Stephen, that you're going to have at a future town manager report, or do you want to say something briefly now? Or
I mean, we have, we need to hire some. We know that for this time of year, we also have budgeted in FY22, and I did talk to DPLM about starting that process. Specifically, are there people who were Rangers before who want to come back that we could waive posting requirements and do some of the shorten the timeline to get them on board? But those wheels are in motion. I think it's been clear that people are going to want to get outdoors when the weather gets nice, and so we want to make sure we try and stay ahead of that.
Right. And I would just offer that I think we also need to be more clear about some of the hiring specifically with regards to all of Concord's lands, because I think White Pond has enjoyed the privilege of raising its hand regularly on the need for Rangers. And I think there's confusion about other staff that's been hired to enforce regulations on other town properties.
Well, there's a difference, I think, between NRC type properties and Sachems Cove. Even Sachems Cove and White Pond, even though the same body of water, are somewhat different from a administrative standpoint. I kind of buried the lead. We do have a ranger that currently works for us today, who is currently monitoring Estabrook on a part-time basis, who I would expect to expand hours to do White Pond in the near future. But we do know we need more than just one person, so we are working on
that. Okay. Terry, you want to give your report?
Oh, sure. So I attended the middle school forum, which was really excellent, similar to what we had tonight. And so have been attending regularly the capital planning task force. We continue to debate almost every week now whether we're going to have a recommendation of a standing capital committee or what we're calling an enhanced capital planning process. And I think we're getting closer now. Hopefully this next meeting this seems to be the last big stumbling block before we can finish our report. And we're still on track to finish by June and not need another extension. I think everybody is eager to wrap this up. I attended the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. A lot happened at that meeting. Phase 2B, as you know, is the construction over Route 2 that will connect our trail up through Acton. And regular construction meetings are resuming, including our town staff. And the last weekend of April and the first weekend of May, they are going to close Route 2 westbound during those weekends. And they'll have a detour around by Weatherby Street. So they're working pretty quickly now on this crossing of Route 2. So another thing that came up was Junction Park. Marcia and staff are planning to put the pavement markings on the sidewalks of each side of Junction Park. And they're going to add new signs and relocate some signs to alert all kinds of people with wheels, not just bikes, but skateboarders, scooters, anybody with wheels. It's going to say dismount, please dismount and walk your wheels through the pedestrian zone. And most of the meeting was taken up, as Susan mentioned, the representative from DOT was at the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail meeting talking about the last half mile. And what's happening is that basically they're rethinking whether state funds can pay for private fencing. They can't. So some of the butters thought that state funds or town funds were going to pay for private gates and private fences. So there was a lot of discussion about this. And there will be an extra meeting this month of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail as soon as we hear back. Because the Sagem's Cove area is environmentally sensitive. There's a lot of erosion. White Pond is a great pond that has access for all residents. So there's a lot of issues here on public versus private, and the state has to take another look and come back to see the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail people again. And then finally, we had an exciting project. There's a student teacher named Alana Honan. She grew up in Concord. She's a student teacher at Sanborn, and she is coming to a future select board meeting, I do believe, to talk about this mural that she wants to do through the Powder Mill Tunnel on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. So it's a very exciting project. She's going to be working with 8th graders and some high school students, and very colorful. It's a social justice community mural project. So we'll be hearing more about that. Jake?
Terry, is that, forgive me if is it on the outside of the tunnel? Because I would assume the inside is dark, so.
Right, it's going to be on the inside, and that is, they're going to use light colors, and they have a special varnish that repels graffiti. She was asked that question at the meeting, and she's been looking into lights, and she decided against that for now, but it's still being developed. So I do believe, I'm not sure, Linda, but I think at some point she might be coming before the select board.
Well, I think you had steered her in that direction originally. And I wrote back to her and said that at this point, she was speaking with the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee and Marcia, and that seemed to be the right track that she needed to pursue at this time.
Right.
So just
may or may not have to come for select board approval.
Yeah. Okay.
Linda?
Yes, go ahead.
Just to build on two things Terry mentioned, both the Junction Park safety signage things and that Route 2 project are on the agenda for our Wednesday Transportation Advisory Committee at 3:00. So we will be talking about that. The Route 2 thing, they are in their planning stages for that. That's at the end of the month. And I don't know, there's some new issues that came up at the end of the week that may need to be addressed. So just stay tuned. But the short of it is that's a big deal. And we will, if that project moves forward, we'll make sure that we do plenty of notice to the community, message boards, like the whole thing. Because it's, even though it's weekend work, that rotary is busy on the weekends as well. So we are going to be talking about that Wednesday.
Okay, good. As well as Junction Park, it sounds like. Yeah. Okay, good. Terry, were you finished?
I'm all set.
Okay, thanks very much. Matt.
All right. So first of all, on the Housing Authority, one of the two finalists for the executive director position withdrew from consideration. So the authority voted to authorize the chair to negotiate a contract with the remaining candidate, Martin Corona. So it looks like Martin Corona will be our new executive director for the Housing Authority. But that does also have to be, the contract has to be approved by DHCD. There's a long process, so it'll take a little while for that to happen. The Recreation Commission, they worked on and voted for a letter of support for expanding the gymnasium at the future middle school. And I believe that we're in receipt of that letter under separate cover. The Public Access Advisory Committee reviewed the PEG budget, and they'll be sending us a letter recommending approval of that budget as part of the enterprise budgets process. I had to miss the Public Ceremonies Committee because of a clash with the Housing Authority, but as you see, they were continuing to develop plans for Patriots Day. And then the middle school public forum I also attended. There was really wide range of community input, lots of different topics actually. And then the NMI StarMet committee. So the committee completed their final edits. Marcia and others are assembling that, and we hope to have publication tomorrow. That was the current estimate. And we also will get a select board presentation on April 12th of the findings of that committee. So look forward to that. And that's it.
Thanks, Matt, very much. Yeah, question?
If I could just amend or expand my White Pond Advisory Committee
sure.
Report. This was not actually discussed at the advisory committee, but because it references a letter that we issued to the State Department of Fish and Wildlife regarding fish stocking of White Pond and continued concerns about the continued stocking of White Pond with large rainbow trout, non-native, and particularly impactful on the health of the pond. I would love to perhaps find a later date to talk about this further. The fish stocking already happened, and despite our having sent the letter and apparently receiving no response. So just wanted to
So it was stocked with the trout?
It was stocked with the trout, the largest of the trout.
Okay.
All rainbow.
All right. Thank you for that important update. The fishermen are probably happy, but the pond health, not so much. All right. I'll just add that I attended a warrant review meeting, and we could see that the warrant is now available on the website and hopes to be published by the 13th. So thanks to Chris Carmody and everybody who worked to put that together, and to the printer on time. And that concludes my report. Other things have already been reported on. Okay. Miscellaneous correspondence. There's a significant amount in our packet today. And in addition, we had one more about the middle school size of the auditorium, et cetera, that came in after the packet was presented this afternoon or late morning for a second time. Okay. Any further public comments? Okay, hearing none, seeing none. I'm ready for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Sure.
Okay, good. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo?
Thank you, everyone. Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss?
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
And myself, Ms. Bates? Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening.
You too.